Much. Welcome, 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 everyone. Um, just to get started quickly, if you've been here before, you probably already know all these things, and that Salesforce Security Office Hours is what this is. And we're excited to have Jessie Grenfell with us today, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more thoroughly in just a few minutes. But so you have an idea of how this will go today. We'll do some introductions. We'll recap our last office hours, talk about the latest, new, exciting, terrifying data breaches and things that are going on in the world. And then our topic today is, what does secure custom portal architecture look like when Salesforce is your data source? And then we'll do some Q&As and share some security resources with you. So if you have questions, you're always welcome to put them in the chat, but we'll probably get through the presentation itself first and then go back and answer any questions. So Salesforce Security Office Hours was created in response to a troubling reality that data breaches in the Salesforce ecosystem continue to increase. I know you've seen this, you've seen the information that's coming out. Seems like every other day, Salesforce Ben is posting a new breach and something that we have to worry about and be concerned about. So each session that we do focuses on a Salesforce specific security best practice, usually, and sometimes at the architecture level, because that's where so much of it takes place. But we're trying to provide some clear, actionable steps that you can take to strengthen your data security and reduce the risk of a breach in your own environment. Some days it's not like, is it going to happen? It's like, when is it going to happen? So, open engagement, raise your hand if you do have a question in the middle of the presentation, not to break Jessie's stride, let her, go through that. But feel free to put those questions in the chat if you want to hold them till the end, or just raise your hand if we need to acknowledge you in the middle. So I'm Melissa Hill Dees. I am Tech Evangelist here at EzProtect and excited to be with you all today. And let's do my slide deck here. If I can get it to work. And I'm going to let Jessie introduce herself. Hope you're on mute, Jessie.
Of course. I am Jessie Grenfell. I am the CEO and principal architect at Codality, which is a boutique software development firm. We do focus on Salesforce-centric systems, but we also do the full stack development as well. So I have more than 20 years leading, architecting, and hands-on developing software from small businesses and a lot of nonprofits earlier in my Salesforce days up through enterprise. About 20 years in the Salesforce ecosystem, believe it or not. And within that, have worked in financial services, insurance, nonprofits, education, and sustainability orgs are some of the repeat customers that I've had since then. And then what I'll be talking about today is what I just wrapped up last year when I was software development team lead at Trajan Wealth.
So exciting. And we want to let you know, of course, EzProtect is who provides this office hours for you. And we're always happy to talk with you about that product itself, but that's not what this is about. This is really about sharing the expertise that Jessie's willing to share with us. And I'll try and go through the slides and keep up with her since I'm doing them. um, Salesforce configuration drift is what we talked about last time. I don't know if you were able to attend. It was a fascinating session. If you missed the office hours last time, you have a QR code here that you can grab and take a look at, or you can always go to our website and they are all listed there for your convenience to be able to click into and go and catch up on those. So hot off the press, Salesforce sounds alarm over fresh data extortion campaign. I'm not going to read this to you. You know who ShinyHunters is, and they just keep popping up in the news. All sorts of frightening things that are happening. I'm sure, Jessie, you have read about what's going on with ShinyHunters, and I wonder, just to start off, if you have anything to say about the things that are happening with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is this is yet another breach that I think some people are kind of blaming a little bit on Salesforce, but it really isn't. It's more about configuring Salesforce and making sure that you are keeping on top of the security best practices. So that is a recurring theme. So this is a very timely time to be having this talk because it's the same thing with an external portal too.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a great point. And I think we often forget that it's easier to blame the technology than it is to blame the humans in charge of the technology sometimes. And sometimes human error is what causes the breach rather than a problem with the technology, although that happens too. So, from a standpoint of actionable things to do right now, I'm sure that Matt put this together for us, and I appreciate that because he is truly the security expert, much more so than I am. But disabling API enabled in the the guest user profile seems to continue to be a challenge for so many situations. The org-wide defaults, the portal user visibility and site user visibility. I have seen so many times Matt pull data from Experience Cloud sites that you would just be aghast at what you can find there, without hacking into it, just readily available. Disable self registration unless it's explicitly required. Review the Aura event monitoring logs, and then designate a security contact in Salesforce. So that's important to be able to be notified right away. One of the biggest challenges with data breaches is oftentimes you don't even know it's happened until weeks, months later. And that's statistically what goes on there. So, what does secure custom portal architecture look like when Salesforce is your data source? That's what Jesse's here to answer us today. And if you'll just let me know, Jesse, when you want me to go to the next slide, I'll be glad to do that for you. And I'll let you take it away.
Wonderful, and thank you for that introduction and warm up there. Yeah, so I have been, as I mentioned, I've been in Salesforce for about 20 years now. I've been working with portals since there have been portals through all of the many iterations. But last year I had this interesting opportunity to build a external portal that used Salesforce essentially as the data source and also security management. So that's what we're going to go through today. And yeah, you can go to the next. So Trajan Wealth, up until a couple weeks ago, was my employer. I was the software development team lead there for almost 3 years. They are a wealth management firm, which means they are selling financial products like the stock products and insurance and annuities that their clients buy. They're managing currently about $2.7 billion in assets. That's what's actually on traded on the stock exchange. When I first started there, they already had a client portal that was built on Experience Cloud. At that point, Experience Cloud was sufficient for what they were looking for, which was largely summaries of account information and file management. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that looked like. And then last year, we switched to an external portal and mobile app. And even aside from the mobile app aspect of that, we had hit a point where, the features we were looking at for this new release just could not be handled in Experience Cloud. So one of the things I'll talk about today is kind of what the limitations are and what the factors are to consider in deciding to go external. What we built was on an architecture that spanned Auth0, which was the identity management and authentication. We had a GraphQL API in MuleSoft. Salesforce was both a data source, but also where we had the logic that was managing row level security. Trajan, like many financial firms, is a Microsoft shop, so the um, portal was hosted on Azure, and there was also a custom login process that leveraged Azure for the initial login of users. As you can imagine, there's kind of a higher security threshold for a financial application like this that we had to go through. And then finally, a lot of the data from the custodial banks in particular was transactional data would have cost probably around $1 trillion to store in Salesforce. So that was stored off in Snowflake. And each of those layers has its own trust boundary. So, I mentioned that these are resulting in stock trades. The data is also being used for billing and for payroll. It was a very robust Salesforce instance that Trajan had that kind of managed all of the operations. So, opening up the portal is opening up people's personal information, their financial information, and putting this door into a Salesforce of a financial institution that's managing a lot. So there's a lot on the line and real compliance consequences to what we were doing. Go to the next. So how we came to that decision and some things that you can consider if you are looking to build something externally yourself. One of the main reasons, of course, people do use Experience Cloud is because that user security is built in. It's point and click configurable. Again, that's on you to ensure that you are doing that securely. But at least it's all kind of laid out for you, and there are boundaries to it. If you're building an external portal, you're now responsible for handling the row level security. So your API, your integration user can be configured to be limited for what objects and fields can be accessed. But as far as what data the users can get to, that is on you, and that is a heavy responsibility. I decided to just kind of focus on the customer community users. That's where we were at. The licensing has changed, of course, since we even initially went through this analysis, but it's roughly the same now that community customer or customer community users, their row level access is controlled by an upline to the contact record. So basically, that is just built in. You don't even have to configure that. Either a record ties back to the contact record that is for that user logging in, and that is how the row level security is handled. There is some things we did have Apex that was expanding on that. And what we found was that to go beyond what was kind of built into the Experience Cloud for that row level data, but the Apex that was involved was pretty much like what we essentially needed for an external portal. So you may get to a point that trying to get around that limitation is just not even worth it. Another limit to make note of is that those customer community licenses only can access up to 10 objects. And that was another factor for Trajan because they were looking to expand with a lot of service requests, which are stored as cases. But the service requests are all tying out to other data in the system. So they're all about particular financial accounts and beneficiaries. And it was adding up to more than 10. And also it was referencing financial service cloud objects, which means we would have had to have a license, and that's extraordinarily expensive. So there are license tiers beyond that expand those limits, but they also cost a lot more. Partner is fairly flexible, almost as flexible as a standard Salesforce user, but for a customer portal, that just doesn't really make financial sense. Another thing to consider, you can do a lot with Apex and LWCs in Experience Cloud. So the initial portal we had performance charts that were using a JavaScript D3 library to visualize data from Snowflake, and we had dynamic document generation happening for quarterly statements. So you can get very far, but it is worth noting that there are limits to what you can do with Apex and LWCs and Experience Cloud, and it can be very frustrating. Anybody who has like a full stack background is kind of familiar with the limits you hit in Salesforce when you're working with Apex. That is even more in Experience Cloud. You'll kind of bump into those things. So that's another factor if you're looking to do very advanced features. And then finally, there's just certain features that you can do with a mobile app that just are not possible with a web app, like push notifications, accessing the camera, and that kind of thing. So how we architected the security, and a lot of this is fairly industry standard, and I'm trying to focus on the architecture, but I'll let you know the platforms we were using. So first off, we're using JWTs. Um, if you're not familiar, JWTs are JSON Web Tokens. This is kind of the standard authentication and authorization mechanism that is being used these days for users, and they are self-contained tokens that securely transmit user identity. They can also include metadata, and they are signed by the issuer to prevent tampering. So once that JWT gets issued, you are able then to validate it, see that the user was authorized, ensure that it wasn't adjusted, and of course those tokens have an expiration date, so they can only be used for so long, but you can then pass the token throughout your stack without having to authenticate every step of the way, but still having that assurance that you are dealing with a logged in user and know who they are. To accomplish that, you're going to need an identity management system. There are a lot of options out there. We considered Microsoft Entra for a while, just because we already had access to it being a Microsoft network. Ultimately decided to use Auth0, which is a SaaS platform that is purpose-built for this identity management. So it will walk you through, and each application you're creating, it's going to ask you, is it React? Is it a web portal? And then it very like tightly narrows what you can do and what you can configure. So it's just kind of a nice, makes it a little bit easier to configure, and it just kind of ensures that you're doing everything in the right way. You then need to verify JWTs. So again, there's a number of ways to handle this, but in MuleSoft, the REST API apps can be configured to do this. So you just can turn it on, set the issuer, set up how the JWT is structured. It will validate it automatically. Notice I did qualify that to say that it's REST API apps. We were actually building a GraphQL API. So there was this little workaround that I had to build a proxy application that was a REST API that handled the JWT verification and then just passed the request on to our GraphQL application, which was internal only to MuleSoft. So you couldn't get to it externally. And that way we knew everything coming into it had to have gone through that validation process. Another thing, it's one of those things I shouldn't have to say, but obviously with ShinyHunters I do. Integration users should always be unique to the application and limited in scope. So they should not be wide open to everything in your system, because then if anything does go wrong, what's gone wrong is opening up everything, as opposed to at least just having it kind of limited down to what those users really need. And then another piece for us was just the way that this was architected in Apex. And I'll get a little bit more into the weeds on this, but query and DML logic was standardized in Apex portal webhooks. So there were only two webhooks ultimately for handling queries and the DML type calls. And that standardization meant just a less of an attack surface. We could have basically replicated the API in Salesforce, and we have 20 something endpoints in the API. We could have done the same thing in Salesforce, and then that would have been 20, different things that we then had to lock down to, require the JWT token and go through all that. It's just more complexity is always going to make it harder. So that kind of elegant architecture that my now CTO, Ryan, built for us there really kind of helped just make that easier and standardize the security process, always requiring that JWT token.
So, Jesse, I have one question before you go forward. I hear you saying all of this, and I know I personally have been working a lot lately with AI, right? And I am just, from the work that I've done, I'm imagining that you would recommend all of this in the same situation. I mean, if you're using AI externally, whatever you're doing, all these same security precautions are top of mind.
Oh, I mean, top of mind, about even more so than currently, because AI doesn't have judgment and reason. So yeah, all of these same principles will apply, and it's definitely something we're thinking about in those kind of projects too.
Sure. Great.
So For the row level security, so this is the one that you really have to kind of think about and come up with a way to handle it. We actually ended up with two different ways we did it, but I'll talk about what we did first. So the high level business logic was clients have a right to view all of their household data. So Trajan households can have two members, usually a husband and wife. They can see each other's data, but then service requests, which are cases, are limited, of course, to financial accounts that they own. Ownership can be joint or single ownership. So that's the business logic we were looking to accomplish. In Salesforce, we had all of the GraphQL API properties mapped to Salesforce objects and fields. This is so that made it configurable, made it easy as we were building it out. There were a lot of changes and things that we had to add, and we could always just go to one place to do that mapping, and that included the relationships for traversal, which was kind of important with the way that we built this Apex. So any request that was coming in, we got that JWT from the user. The user got generated when clients became officially clients. So we would send a call out to Auth0, send over a UUID. I'll talk a little bit more about that to Auth0 to set up that JWT authentication later. So anytime we would get the JWT in, we could then see which person account is this tied to, and therefore what household are they in. The All of the GET requests from the API, GET requests being the equivalent of a query in um, GraphQL, had a single endpoint, one webhook that it came in through in Salesforce. And so that web point would take the household and then would use our fflib and ORM structure to generate the SOQL query with the mapping that we had set up. But the queries always had the household tacked onto them. There was no way around that. So that way, no matter what was requested, if it was outside of the household, it could not be returned in any of the queries happening there. Similar logic for what they call mutations in GraphQL, which are essentially DML requests. Those were always very strictly scoped to records downline of the person account. So didn't matter if somebody tried to pass in an ID from a financial account that it wasn't theirs. It just wasn't going to be allowed. It would be filtered out automatically. So that was how we handled it in Apex. I'll talk a little bit later. We ended up doing something a little bit different in a later iteration of this process, but this was a very elegant kind of way of handling that. Yeah, worked very well. At the end of this, we did have a pen test to ensure that everything was working as it should be. They went through their automated tests and their manual tests, and we passed. So all of our paranoia ultimately did pay off.
And I love the view rights, right? So you're again looking at the least amount of privileges, right? To
Yeah.
ensure that security, and I'm assuming that they didn't have any editing rights even on their own household data.
They did have some, for the most part, it went through servicing requests, which then had to be approved and usually it required like legal signatures. So a case would come
Yeah,
in and there was a whole document generation process as well tied to it. But there were a couple DML statements. So like if you're adding a beneficiary, that's adding a person to your system. So they were directly sending in like new person accounts, but they would always be tied to the household and related back to that person.
interesting.
So, one thing I wanted to talk about was the importance of obscuring record IDs. So, this is not even just portals, but anytime you are sending data outside of Salesforce or any system, this is actually not Salesforce specific, security best practices that you do not expose system IDs externally. There are a couple ways that hackers can use that information if the IDs are being generated systematically, so they're sequential. Those patterns in and of themselves can be a clue to them. And it's just, a piece of the puzzle that you don't want to hand out. So the recommended solution to that is to use UUIDs. Salesforce, their system class in Apex does have a method to generate UUIDs. So for some use cases, that is sufficient. I do want to know we didn't end up using that, and the reason was they're not reversible. So once you generate a UUID, there is no way to look at that UUID, the one from the system class, anyways, and then translate it back to the system ID. Obviously, to a degree, that's what you were looking for, and I'll talk about how we made that secure. But that means you have to store the ID, the UUID, in a field. And there are objects in Salesforce that you cannot put custom fields on, like case comment, feed item, content document. So that path wasn't going to work as soon as we realized we were going to have to include those. And it's also just a lot to store them back constantly. So what my technical architect Ryan came up with was a algorithm that transformed UUIDs on the fly. So Salesforce IDs, as we know, are 15 or 18 digits long. That they had to be base 16 encoded to work for UUIDs. But the other step that Ryan took was this kind of bike lock way of formulaically permutating the digits in it so that it would kind of scramble the original ID before it was encoded. So what that meant was that we had a way of encoding and decoding these UUIDs back and forth. But you needed the combination essentially to be able to do that. So if you just had a UUID without that combination, without knowing all of this logic, you still could not get the Salesforce ID. So it was still hidden, but it gave us a nice flexible way to do that translation right in Apex. You can go to the next. Another thing to make note of is once you go outside of the Experience Cloud, you are now also losing the audit history. So anytime you have DML coming in, instead of the portal user getting logged, you are going to be seeing the integration user in your created by and last modified fields. So we instituted the convention of just creating custom fields on any objects that were going to be a DML target. So cases, those person accounts for people, there were a handful of things that we had to put these fields on. And again, because it was all standardized logic, any of those DML calls were always going through the same kind of portal engine. So you had to have those fields, even if the data model expanded. If you tried to insert or update anything without them, it would error out so that it kind of at least force that convention to be kept. So that's just another thing to consider as the audit history that you do kind of lose when you go this path. And then finally, I thought I would just give a little bit of a comparison because we had this interesting opportunity where right as the portal app and the portal and the mobile app were going live and we were putting it into the hands of clients. Trajan was also going through a CRM migration process to leave Salesforce. So my team assisted in that process, and one of the ways we assisted was by rebuilding this API to now point to now use Creatio, which was the CRM that they went to instead of Salesforce. When we did that, we made the choice to switch from MuleSoft to AWS. So now we had the same API being built in both. So it was a little bit of an interesting comparison that I thought I would share. Reasons why you would choose one or the other. MuleSoft provides those configurable authentication features, like I mentioned, being able to configure the JWT. So that is nice to have that handled for you in AWS, kind of similar to, Experience Cloud versus building your own portal. You're responsible for adding that layer. So there's just a little bit more responsibility on your end. What we found was development was much faster in AWS. It does require coding skills. But the main reason for that was just there were a lot of MuleSoft kind of holes in the documentation. They're very good for your kind of basics of what you need. When you get down into the weeds of staging tables in Snowflake and some more of the advanced things using their components, there's a lot of just blank boxes. So not only for human development, but this ended up being my first project of trying to do AI assisted coding. And it was just not even possible because there was just nothing for the AI to reference in the documentation and not a whole lot of code examples out there. Again, for these more kind of nuanced little detailed things that come up when you're doing a project like this. So for us, it was just a lot faster to build in AWS. And I'll say MuleSoft has a visual flow interface. It's very similar to flows in Salesforce, but you still do really need integration and data transformation skills to use it. So it's kind of development level skills anyways. And at that point, we just found it easier to do in AWS. So I just wanted to kind of share that. And with that, that actually is the end of what I had. This was a really interesting project. I learned a lot myself. I hope I kind of compiled it and conveyed it accurately. But I am happy to take questions on anything anybody has.
Yeah. And I'm going to stop sharing our slide deck so that we can actually see each other. And Tristan, do we have some questions in the?
Yeah, we actually have two there that I'd love to cover. First one, kind of going back to the presentation, it's in the chat a little bit there between Missy and Paul, but just wondering if you can give a little bit more context around that, around bike lock. Missy, do you feel like asking your question a little bit more? I know Paul tagged it on a little bit, and
Hey,
everyone has a mic. Hi.
Yeah,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. With the bike lock, and Paul said it was scrambling a Salesforce ID, but my question was, is the bike lock kind of like a cipher or was it something additional that's added in?
It was something additional that we actually wrote, or I should say Ryan actually wrote. And scrambling is the right word for it. That's why I said bike lock is, the ones that have the numbers that you actually kind of twist around. It was that kind of idea that things getting scrambled, that you could only unscramble if you had the combination.
Okay, that is so rad. Thank you. And thank you also, shout out Paul, for helping answer too.
Cool. Yeah, I love novel crypto. That sounds like a interesting way to get to something I think we're going to be doing a lot more of. So appreciated the intel on that.
Yeah, yeah. Happy to talk it through if you have any questions.
And Melissa, we have a question in the Q&A, if you could get to that one.
Yes. Let's see if I can get there. Yeah. So yeah, so Jacob says, so Beach Horn did a presentation for us a couple of weeks ago and said, so Jacob says he's been thinking a lot about his concerns about vibe coding and how poor security with MCPs and vibe coding is implemented. His question is, where do you think things are headed as more and more people are becoming, quote, developers with little understanding of the risks they're exposing their companies to, and what should we be doing now?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I mean, it's something that Codality has kind of advertised ourselves as being like AI powered, but with the experts in charge and kind of babysitting the AI. So I think those are kind of the two paths. I think there's going to be people like us, people who have a lot of experience and know the behind the scenes already, controlling it. But I also think, and I know there is a number of products out there. There's a platform called RadHash that I've been watching come up for a little while. That it's kind of the same idea of Salesforce, where you have a online platform that lets you with tools to let you build software, but in a controlled manner. So you have a payment module that handles the kind of the security aspects, and same thing with authentication. To me, that seemed like the kind of the safest path of, here are these modules. They are already secured for you. You just have to configure them and get them working. I think that's probably more the way that AI development is going to go when it comes to like vibe coded apps, because we're already seeing how scary that can be if you don't have that in place.
Yeah, I agree, Jesse. And like I say, I have been doing a lot with AI recently, and I haven't written code in literally 40 years. So I don't consider myself a developer anymore at all. And it's fascinating because I find more and more that it helps more than you would realize in vibe coding to be the developer, to understand those underlying pieces and parts, and it makes the development go so much faster. In fact, Beach Horn recommended Kiro.dev to me. I don't know if you've looked at it or used it. It works great, But if you don't know the actual back end, it's hard to kind of ride herd on it, and maintain the quality and I think it takes twice as long because you don't know how to tell the AI to help you correct, what you know is wrong. So
Yeah.
I think
You
that's a
don't know
really
what you don't know.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And then plus, like you say, that the AI makes recommendations. I know with Kiro.dev, they are always recommending AWS. They have yet to recommend MuleSoft or anything else, to me that would be different. So um, that will be interesting to see too. I think the products that come to the forefront because they've got the documentation or the case studies or the examples out there and available, for AI to look at. And again, if you don't know, I mean, Jesse, you've probably worked with, every sort of API that is currently available and can make those decisions, but someone who is not as well trained or well versed is going to take the recommendation of the AI, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of the same thing we were talking about before of like you get Salesforce and suddenly as a non-technical person, you're able to build software and build a portal and expose things on the web. But with that comes this risk that gets introduced of it. You have to know what you're doing, and that is just exponentially more so with AI development.
Yeah, I agree. We have other questions? Anyone?
I had a quick question too while people continue to, type in the chat. I'm curious, Jesse, for you, like, what's your take on, we keep on seeing these data breaches happening. I keep on seeing CISOs go through it, then they retire or they throw it under the rug, they blame something. Like, what advice would you give to those startups right now, those founders that are building out their architecture to make sure that they are working to not have these same incidences happen? Like, and also I'm kind of just curious, what's your take? Why do we keep on seeing this happen? Like, we know data breaches are going to happen. Why do we keep on seeing CISOs like go through the same activity? I'm just curious what your thoughts are because you've been in the field for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's kind of what we were just talking about of opening up these capabilities to non-technical people opens up the risk as well. That is a piece of it. The other thing is just kind of goes back to scaling. So for startups, I think what commonly happens is maybe your core initial group is on top of these things, and it's this internal cultural kind of knowledge, and then you grow and that doesn't scale well. So the trick is making sure as you expand that it really becomes policy and it becomes encoded in the way that you work and not just the culture of the people who started it that maybe you don't realize as you're hiring new people that they don't have that kind of background and they're not thinking the same way. So yeah, it's just being very thoughtful and having those kind of standard operating procedures to make sure that everybody is on track and doing it right.
I feel like it's that, but it's also too, right? It's like I was reading a lot of data around kind of like, I mean, security, right? Like so much fun security, but like it's so important. And so one of the things that I was reading, I think it was like IT computer, and they were looking at studies for adoption around security awareness and training. They found actually that humor was the most effective way to get people more engaged. And so I hope that people are just leaning into a little bit of humor because security is a lot, but getting people trained, creating a security first kind of mindset, that's hard. Like, have you ever worked in an org that did like security awareness really, really well?
Yeah, there were I wish I could remember what the source was. Trajan actually had videos that were exactly that were like very humorous. And it wasn't theirs, it was like an HR service that they were subscribing to. So I know that that's definitely out there. And yeah, if you're not everybody can build that themselves. I would look. There are services out there that have that kind of training of how to handle, even just your emails and things like that. And they did it in a very humorous way, and that helps obviously because it's hard you to sit through hours of that if it's just bland security for especially for non-technical, but even for technical people.
Well, that extended learning is what's so important, right? I mean, Jesse might not accidentally let somebody into the system, but Melissa, who doesn't know any better, or hasn't, I would answer an email or give access to something, do something stupid, it just helps for everybody to understand the risks that are involved.
Oh yeah, everybody's
And,
responsibility now.
That's right.
and Paul's in the chat.
Yep.
Paul, what's the combo here?
Which
Any commentary?
oh yeah, sorry, I just published. To your point, Tristan, there's a friend of mine
Mhm.
who I nerd out with regularly. There's a parody account called Swift on Security, where somebody poses as Taylor Swift giving IT security device advice.
Stop.
I will check that out.
I totally agree. You have to make this stuff fun.
It's hard though, right? And it's like the other thing I was saying to someone too, and I don't know if you feel this way too, Jesse, or community, but I feel like the hackers have gotten so smart. It's like a whole drip campaign now. You know what I mean? Like we're going to continue to see stuff coming out from last September. So yeah, I'm like, I kind of just want to grab a cocktail with one of these hackers and just understand like what their go-to-market strategy is because I find it fascinating. Morbid, I know, but just curiosity.
Yeah, no, the
I'm curious
personalities.
too, right? I'm curious too, Jesse, for you too, like you've been so generous with your time. Can you just tell us a little bit like about Codality, because I do feel like you all do so much amazing work. And I just want to know a little bit more about like what are the projects the kind of people and communities and organizations you like to help? Because you're doing some really awesome work and I just love seeing you like blow up online in a good way.
I appreciate that. I'm not always gonna the self-promotion side of things. I'll say to tie it back into this conversation, one of the things that
Mhm.
we do provide is fractional architecting. So a lot of teams are not at the size yet where it makes sense to have a full-time architect on staff. A full-time architect can be the one that is giving that kind of guidance. Hopefully, they should be the one that is giving that kind of security guidance on this is how you build it, and this is what you need. You need to obscure your IDs and making sure those things are in place. So one of the things we do offer is fractional architecting. So if you are not yet at that point where it makes sense to have somebody full time, we can come in and help you out either on tech debt or regular maintenance, whatever it is. But including projects where security is going to be a concern and you want that kind of architect and somebody coming in and setting you up and making sure you're on the right path. So that is one of the services we offer that is not just about security. We also can do fractional just for helping you tackle tech debt and helping you get your agile processes in line since I've gone through that a few times now, that kind of change management. Um, where I started out in Salesforce in nonprofits. That's how I got into it initially. I started out working for a nonprofit and became known in that community, and that's what let me launch my Platy IT. It was my first consulting firm, so I have a lot of nonprofit experience. Most of it was not actually the NPSP. It was really more program management and nonprofits that were using it to manage their nonprofit. So it was a lot of heavy customization. And that's kind of the similar to what Codality is doing now. I started my career in finance. That's why I ended up at Trajan and working with an insurance company. So kind of came back. So now I have this breadth of verticals that I have worked with. But we do focus on projects that are kind of like deep customization within Salesforce, middleware integration, and we also do full stack development as well. So trying to branch out more from Salesforce. One of our first clients is actually a beauty and body art platform that we are building. It is for professionals in that industry, almost like LinkedIn, but their needs are a little bit different than what happens on LinkedIn. So it's about hiring and it's about like renting seats at salons and connecting with customers. And we're building that platform now, and that is completely outside of Salesforce. So yeah, it's kind of nice to be expanding out and doing other things. But Salesforce centric systems is largely the focus for us.
I
Awesome.
love that. And just real fast too, if I could just ask one last, question here too. And anyone feel free to ask any questions while we still have a few more minutes. But I was curious, Jesse, too, like if we're bombarded by information, it is nonstop cognitive overload. If there was one essential thing that you wanted people to walk away with from this talk, what would that be? I would do a Barbara Walters voice, but it's too late for me.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's that it's due diligence because like the kind of things I talked about today that were very high level. there's a lot of nuances that you need to make sure that you're aware of as well, and it changes constantly. So you cannot just like sit on your laurels. What I understood about security 5 years ago is barely relevant today. So you really just have to be on top of it when you're doing something like this, and when you're building it out, you've got to take the time. Don't just let the AI figure it out for you. Go to the sources, understand it yourself. Yeah, I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I could get is just don't assume you know everything because everything changes constantly and it's very fast these days.
That was excellent. And Melissa, do you mind pulling back up the slide for just 1 second for the events, upcoming
I
events?
figured you were ready for that.
Sorry.
No, that's
I'm
okay.
like a backseat driver. This is your show. I'm
No, I'm
sorry.
so glad you're back there. Trust me. The
Um,
the episode
Go
coming
ahead.
sessions, April 2nd, 9 a.m., Salesforce Security Office Hours. How do you migrate Salesforce connected apps to external client apps without breaking integrations? Wow, that's going to be a job. And
Mhm.
the guest speaker is Marija
We
Petronijevic.
love we love her so much. She's
Yes.
brilliant, y'all. She works over at Rippling. She's just amazing. You're gonna love her. And y'all requested this content, so we're here to serve.
Yeah. And then I know Matt and I will be at TDX April 15th and 16th in San Francisco. Matt's presenting on security, as he always does. I'm presenting actually on some AI assisted coding that I've done, Jesse. So we'll see how scary that is, right? But we would love to see you there. Anybody that's coming out, join us. Resources that we've put together for you. Lots of different resources. Like Jesse said, there's so much to know, so much to learn, and anytime we can help, we're happy to do that. Anything we have forgotten, Tristan, that we need to cover?
Yeah, I would just say, before we wrap first, a round of applause for Jesse, everyone, please. Clap emojis. We love it. Thank you so much, Jesse, for taking time and sharing. Oh, we do? Okay, no, that's not hand raised. Thank you so much. Melissa, thank you so much for stepping in. I know Matt had to
Sure.
jump on a work trip, and I know he's really excited to meet you, Jesse. So we'll definitely continue the conversations. What I would say as well, y'all, is we build this program for each of you. So if you ever have a topic you want, please let us know. We really, really appreciate that. And we just want to create educational content for you all. So thank you so much. Stay secure. And Melissa, any closing words?
None from me. Just glad to see you all. Like I say, see you at TDX if you're not coming to Nonprofit Dreaming next week. We'll see you at TDX in April.
All right, y'all. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.